You know how some weeks the news just feels like a total whirlwind? It's so easy to miss how one headline connects to another. Well, this week, if you look closely at the source material, a really clear pattern starts to emerge, a major wave of institutional pushback against the Trump administration. So let's break that down. Here's the thing. All these seemingly random events, a court ruling over here, a congressional vote over there, they're not actually separate. They're all part of a much bigger story about the checks and balances of government in action. We're going to connect those dots for you and show you what that bigger picture looks like. All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start by looking at the overall pattern of this pushback. Then we're going to dive into how the courts responded. After that, we'll turn to some pretty surprising moves in Congress, check out the political context behind it all, and finally ask the big question: what does it all mean when the system itself pushes back? What our source material lays out is this rapid-fire series of official rebukes aimed right at the administration's policies. And we're not talking about just one or two things. It was like a steady stream of challenges coming from both the courts and Congress, all happening within a really short window of time. And this pushback wasn't just focused on one issue. Look at the range here. The disagreements spanned everything from clean energy and the environment to healthcare, election funding, and even the federal budget for science. The sheer breadth of it is a really crucial part of the story. So first up, the judicial branch. The courts were, without a doubt, a major player in this story. All across the country, federal judges delivered this powerful wave of rulings that put a hard stop to several administration policies. I mean, just look at the pace and the consistency here. One court said it was illegal to cut energy funding for so-called blue states. Another one blocked the shutdown of a wind farm. A third ruled that yanking grants from a pediatrician's group was basically illegal retaliation. The message coming from the courts was loud, it was clear, and it was consistent. No. And this quote, wow, it really gets to the heart of the legal reasoning. When the administration tried to cut election funds for some states, a federal judge just shut it down, saying, point blank, that the Constitution gives the president zero authority here. It's such a clear example of the courts drawing a line on executive power. But, the courts weren't the only ones pushing back. A very similar story was playing out just down the road in Congress, with both the House and the Senate taking some pretty bold actions that challenged the administration's plans. In the Senate, you had 5 Republican senators who broke ranks. They actually voted with the Democrats on a war powers resolution that was all about limiting the president's power to take military action in Venezuela. This was not a party line vote, and it sent a really strong message about congressional independence. And then over in the House, the crossover was even bigger. You had 17 Republicans joining with Democrats on a bill tied to the Affordable Care Act. The source material calls this one of the biggest congressional rebukes the president had seen up to that point. But maybe the most dramatic, the most black and white example of this pushback from Congress came down to the budget. We're talking about a massive disagreement between the president's proposed cuts to science funding and what a bipartisan Congress decided to do instead. Just look at this. The administration wanted to slash the National Science Foundation's budget by a whopping 56%. 56. And Congress's response? They basically said, no, thank you, and passed a budget with a cut of less than 1%. It was a near total rejection of the proposal. And you see the exact same pattern with funding for basic research. The White House wanted to cut it by a third, but Congress, on a bipartisan basis, didn't just reject the cut, they actually increased the budget by 2%. This really shows you just how fundamental the disagreement was over national priorities. So you have to ask, right? What's behind all this? Why was Congress suddenly so willing to defy the administration? Well, to really get the why, our source suggests we need to look at the political landscape at the time. In the House, part of the story was just simple math. The Republican majority had gotten so razor-thin that their leadership could only afford to lose one single vote on any bill if the Democrats were all united. That gave even a tiny group of dissenters a ton of power. The looming midterm elections were also playing a huge role. The source describes this political environment where it was seen as a near certainty that Democrats would win back the House. That kind of political pressure, the thinking goes, might have made some Republicans in tough districts want to put a little distance between themselves and the administration. So we've seen the pushback from the courts. We've seen it from Congress. Now let's step back, bring these two powerful threads together, and take a look at the bigger picture. What this really all boils down to is the administration facing a major challenge on 2 separate fronts at the same time. On one side, you have the judiciary enforcing what it sees as the constitutional and legal limits. And on the other, you have the legislature flexing its power of the purse and showing this growing bipartisan independence. In the end, this week of headlines wasn't just about this policy or that one. It was a real-time, real-world demonstration of our constitutional system of checks and balances in action. And it leaves us with this fundamental question. When our governing institutions clash like this, is it a sign of a broken system? Or is it the system working exactly the way it was designed to?